Today's show is brought to you by Ledin.io. If you want to earn some interest on your Bitcoin or USDC, or want to use your Bitcoin as collateral, whether it's to avoid a tax transaction, get quick access to dollars, or double your Bitcoin savings using Ledin's popular B2X loan, Ledin.io is the first digital asset lender with the transparency and security of a formal proof of reserves attestation, raising the bar for transparency in the industry. Ledin, spelled Ledn, is a secure, simple, and easy-to-use platform for managing and growing your digital wealth. I just started to use Ledin this summer, and I have loved the service, and I believe you will too. Last week, I spoke to the team over at Ledin, and we've now agreed that listeners of the Bitcoin Matrix podcast will get an exclusive offer where you guys receive $50 free in USDC if you become a Ledin user and take out a Ledin loan using TBM's exclusive link. To learn more and get started and get $50 free, head over to start.ledn.io/Bitcoin Matrix. And now, let's enter the Bitcoin Matrix, where we get into it with Adam O, aka Denver Bitcoin, on Bitcoin mining, oil and gas, the moralization of the production and consumption of energy, and digital wildcatting.
What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Adam O, aka Denver Bitcoin, is the business development officer for the US market for Upstream Data, a company that pairs modular Bitcoin mining data centers to natural gas engines to convert waste energy, natural gas, into the best form of money the world has ever known, Bitcoin. Adam has been a pioneer in this emerging industry, and he brings a ton of passion and energy to Bitcoin mining and the upstream oil and gas industry. His articles have been published in Bitcoin Magazine and Coinbeast Media, where he also provides one-on-one consultations on Bitcoin mining. Denver Bitcoin is also the founding partner of Stranded Energy Investments. Adam, aka Denver Bitcoin, welcome to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. How are you?
Doing well, man. Sed, great to be here. I've been wanting to be on this podcast forever. I've loved listening to you, and so an honor, truly an honor to sit here with you, sir.
Yeah, man, that's super dope. I'm excited to talk to you. I know we've been trying to do this for probably almost like 9-10 months now, since at least November, December of last year.
Man. We've been back and forth.
But it's been wild. Your profile in the space has grown tremendously, and it seems like every day you're dropping gems on Twitter and just sharing some of your experiences of what's going on. So I'd love to hear.
I was just saying, I don't think it's a whole lot to do with me. I think it has a lot more to do with just Bitcoin, right? And just Bitcoin's price being one of the main things. But secondly, something interesting happened at the beginning of the year where Bitcoin mining became like a hot topic and a kind of a cool or a sexy topic to be involved in or to be knowledgeable on. And so, it's much more, I think, a credit of that like my Twitter has gotten kind of, a lot of followers and a lot of attention. But really what's cool is I think what we're building at Upstream Data, what others are building, Great American Mining, Marty Bent and those guys. I just think it's one of the most disruptive and positively innovative technologies anywhere in any industry today, right? And then beyond that, it's one of the coolest ways and one of the most, I guess, blatant ways that Bitcoin improves the world, right? It's one of these just great examples of how, hey, look, this is how, Bitcoin fits into this equation, and look how much better off things are because of it. It's one of those kind of nobody can argue that this is a bad thing. And so I love being a part of this space, and it's hard not to get fired up about it, right? Especially when I work with people who are ambitious and excited and looking to build all of this out. So
yeah, it's almost like you're riding two rocket ships. and that's been interesting to see over the last year. I mean, energy is one of the most dynamic forces in the universe. Money, another dynamic force, and you're combining those with Bitcoin mining, and you're actually out in the fields. I'd love to hear to what extent, but I remember watching your Twitter about a year ago, and it looked like a lot of what you were doing was hustling and grinding and possibly even off the grid. It seemed like you were moving miners around in your truck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly I'd say during 2020, I kind of just built up a name for myself in terms of participating in the conversation and sharing my own experience being a customer of Upstream Data's and having mined in the oil field. I don't have any massive Bitcoin mining operation that's off grid by any means, but what I do have is a really proficient understanding of upstream oil and gas production and the investment that takes place in upstream, exploration and production. And then beyond that, I think Bitcoin mining is really confusing to a lot of people and mysterious to most everybody. And so a proficient understanding of Bitcoin mining, when you understand both these worlds, it's very obvious how they live in harmony. And so, I think the last, 2020 was me going out, making a name for myself. And I began consulting with oil and gas companies officially, like, in a professional context, to tell them why I think they should really leverage this technology. And in the process of that, they asked me like, hey, who do you think I should call in order to, build out a Bitcoin mine on our flare gas? And I said, well, the only people I can recommend are Upstream Data, right? Because that's who I have experience with. There's these other companies doing it, but I don't know them. So, I would first say, call this guy because I think, call Steve Barber. I think he's doing great stuff. And, inevitably I brought Steve Barber enough business that he was like, all right, we'll hire you on here in the beginning of 2021. And so taking an official, kind of a position at Upstream Data, being able to field the inbound interest, which, Steve hired me, I think at the absolute perfect time where our inbound interest right now is all-time high, right? It's hard enough to keep up with that, let alone, any of my outreach on LinkedIn and my outreach through my own oil and gas network from working back in the day. Like, the inbound is crazy enough. And so there's just a lot of interest and there's a lot of people looking to come at this from various positions. But at the end of the day, the goal is the same. It's to make use of something being wasted or to make use of something that's stranded. And it's really fun to build the infrastructure for the people looking to go do that, right? And we've got a lot of building to do, right? We've got a lot of people in the queue right now, and a lot of customers that are looking to go live here in the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. Before we go any further, is there any chance you could up your mic a little bit or anything else?
Yeah, I think. Let me see if I can. Is that a little bit better? Let me see if I can.
It's a little low, but
I've
comes
got
in a little
AirPods,
better.
so
Yeah. All right.
I can speak up a little bit if that helps.
That might help a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. So, and I'll cut all that out. But so, before, oil and gas and Bitcoin, I'm assuming your forte was networking and business development. But, was there a dream business that you were aspiring to be a part of before oil and gas and Bitcoin? Like, what was really kind of tickling your fancy?
Yeah, when I graduated college, my dream was actually, initially to go work in something that I was passionate about, something I still am I think is really cool, and something I'll probably get involved in some capacity. Is like either mobile gaming or cloud gaming space, right? I think cloud gaming is gonna absolutely blow up because it just makes sense, right? We're getting to the point where we have the capacity and the bandwidth for most people, at least in at least here in the first world, you could say. But beyond that, I think that there's a lot of really cool ways in which to develop great products that instantly have monetization, right? And so you can take creativity and skill and you can instantly monetize, instantly put that product into somebody's pocket. All they have to do is download it, right? It's already in their pocket, right? It's already on the app store that's in their pocket. You just have to get them to go there and look at it and give it a go. And so like, I really liked that idea. It was something that in college, I thought development of that would be great. I really wanted to go work for like a gaming studio initially, whether it be a mobile gaming studio or a platform gaming studio, I didn't really care. And I went for it. Like after out of college, I took like 6 months. I moved to Northern California. I lived with my brother who works in Silicon Valley. He works in, for the tech companies out there, and he's bounced around from a couple tech companies, but and he was a great brother. He hooked me up with, he got me interviews at a lot of different gaming studios. I talked with, EA studios, like, EA Sports with Madden NFL. I talked with, was it King? I talked with the guys over that did, I think, Supercell or whatever. So like a whole bunch of these studios, none of them wanted to hire me because I'm not an engineer. I'm not a computer scientist. And while I made it to a lot of the and out there, all of their interview processes were like multi-tiered. Like it's like a March Madness tournament where like you go on to like the second and third and fourth round of the interview. And I made it to a lot of final rounds, never got picked for a job. And so after about 6 months of, I was still working while I was out there. I wasn't just like a bum, but after about 6 months of working out there and trying to land a job but not doing it, I decided to come back to Colorado. And the cost of living up in Northern California is just terrible. And so it was like almost unsustainable if you're not going to land a six-figure job. Right. And so I moved back to Colorado and I was managing some retail stores. And that was when I kind of fell, ass backwards into an oil and gas job. Right. A customer walked into a retail store that I was managing, and he ended up asking me to come in for an interview to be the, kind of executive or director of sales and marketing for this oil and gas software company. And so by chance, I got that opportunity and I ran with that, right? Which led me to the next thing.
Yeah, awesome. It seems like you've always been thinking big, and that there might have been maybe some gates or gatekeepers, were looking for fiat credentials. And,
Yes.
it seemed like you definitely understood cost of living, and you were like, fuck it, I'll live decentralized. I won't be where maybe the center of this industry is, and I'll just go figure it out somewhere else. And I'll read one of your quotes or one of your tweets. You tweeted, "I bet if you dropped everything right now and went and focused on that one thing you want most in life, forgetting the rest of the noise, nonsense, judgment, and fear, you'd end up exactly where you want to be faster than you ever thought you'd get there." And it seemed like you turned your attention, first oil and gas. And I kind of want to learn, because I think you absorbed pretty much probably a lot so far. And I kind of want to get some versed in some of that. So what is the difference between oil and gas? Let's just start there.
Well, I would say, so oil and gas, like the oil and gas industry, the reason they're grouped together, and it's not just the oil industry or the gas industry, right, necessarily, is because typically, even when you produce oil, gas comes with it, right? So typically, in the process of producing oil, you're going to get water and you're going to get gas that comes with it. And so that's, I guess, why, we call it the oil and gas industry. Typically everyone is producing both to some degree. The difference between the two is quite significant when it comes to on-site economics. And it's also important to note that those aren't the only two streams of revenue on an oil field, right? There's also, NGLs, right? Natural gas liquids, which can be pulled off the gas. And so those are, typically quite valuable. And so looking at Bitcoin mining as something that's taking place on site in oil and gas, it's actually the fourth revenue stream that got added to this upstream oil and gas production industry. And what I mean by that is, the oil and gas industry, I guess, is separated from, you could look at it like upstream, midstream, and downstream. And upstream is the guys that are actually going around drilling, vertical wells, exploring horizontally, injecting wells, fracking wells, and producing oil and gas. The midstream is more so the people who are building out pipelines and negotiating those land contracts to build out pipelines and those rights. And there might be some processing in there. And then downstream is like compressor stations where you send the gas into a massive compressor station, they generate electricity and they send it off to the grid, and somebody actually consumes it like in their business, right? Or downstream would be they actually, the oil refineries where they're actually refining it into gasoline and, millions of other petroleum products, things like Tylenol and, steel. And so there's it's a massive industry in that way, but the upstream side of it is pretty, I'll say this, it's pretty small in the kind of in the same way that like the Bitcoin industry or Bitcoin community is small, that like on the upstream side, I went to a lot of oil and gas shows and I saw a lot of the same faces. Like whether I was in Wyoming or I was in Houston or Kansas, didn't matter. Like I more or less saw the same people. And oftentimes I'd see the same people working for different companies. Like they literally just started going and doing the same job at another company. And so, and it might just been that the company like, you know, sold out and like started under a new name and took some of their employees, you know, it's very, I guess, incestual in that way. Right. And so there's one thing I noticed quickly about the oil and gas industry, but the other thing I noticed, at least the upstream side of it, the other thing I noticed is that these are some of the smartest people in the world. I mean, these are some of the people taking some of the most extraordinary risk I think you can take, right? In my opinion. I mean, a lot of these, you know, men and women are going out raising capital to go explore for minerals, right? Explore for hydrocarbons, 7,000, 9,000 feet below the surface of the earth, looking to get a monetary return, looking to try to profit, looking to say, hey, can you borrow 150 grand from you? I'll pay you back with interest, and we're still going to be able to pay ourselves for our time, and we're going to make enough money that was worth it. I mean, that's really extraordinary in my mind, right? That's a lot different than a lot of the work I was exposed to in my life, right? Like a lot of where my mind was at was, like I said, like mobile gaming and ways in which I could sell products over the top and I could streamline. When I went to the oil and gas industry, I was humbled quite quickly by really how the world worked. And when I realized how the world worked, when I realized how upstream oil and gas operated, that's when I realized I didn't want to leave this industry. Like I wanted to be involved in this forever. I knew I wasn't going to be able to right away because I just didn't have enough money, right? I just hadn't made enough and saved enough money to really go out and do what I wanted to do yet. But there was a day when you know, back to that tweet that you said, you know, and if you just dropped everything and focused on that one thing that you wanted, I think you'd get there a lot faster than you expected. It's because really, like that's kind of what I did at one point. I was working in you know, after I left the oil and gas job, I worked a corporate job for I think 6 or 7 months, and I left that job just on a whim, right? It was like one day I didn't plan to quit. It was just that day I just couldn't do it anymore. Like my passion and my focus, my attention was elsewhere. And it was making me a bad employee because I wasn't able to focus on what I was supposed to be doing. Not at all, right? My mind was really elsewhere. And beyond making me like a bad employee, it like I knew that I was going to regret every moment I didn't just go do what had my attention. And so I just, you know, 2018, I just said, or 2019, I guess, I just said, screw it. And like, it was like summer of 2019, I just left my job. And that's when I started, you know, I went and raised capital to begin mining on oil and gas. I became a customer of Upstream Data's, and then I started a consultancy, and here we are.
Yeah, awesome. You know, I can't help but think, you know, you mentioned extraordinary risk. And I think that, you know, in the O&G industry, that's both with capital and accidental. Real shit can happen out in the field.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, that's like, I mean, it's Moore's law out there, right? Like
yeah.
Whatever bad that can happen, inevitably will happen, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't matter, and it shit happens. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to go fancy on the oil field. This is really like a place where mistakes are penalized severely.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious a lot about the lifestyle and some of the people you meet, and some of I'm curious whether the people that are making these big decisions are some of the same people out in the field doing the exploratory research, or is it more, you know, numbers people and marketing people who make the call or place the capital, and then they hire people to go out in the field? And are you meeting with both, or, you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's tough to answer in a sense. I'll say this: it kind of depends on the size of the oil and gas company. Right, like the bigger oil and gas companies, which I've dealt with before, right? Obviously, they have a lot more red tape. They've got a lot more office people that dress nicely, and they're not getting dirty in the field every day, right? They're not the pumpers. They're not on-site engineers. They're not fixing shit. But there's also plenty of mom and pop oil and gas, or small to medium-sized oil and gas operators that have, you know, I'd say, you know, anywhere from a couple, you know, 5 to 50 wells. And they might be very low producing wells, but that's okay. Like, they have a fair amount of properties, and it might be just something where they have like 1 or 2 employees that run the entire thing. Like they have one person doing the accounting, they've got a pumper, or maybe they just hire a pumping company to go pump their wells, and one guy, goes to 5 wells or 7 wells every day, and like he covers 50 in a week, and then he starts his week back over and he goes back to that first, group of wells, and that's really his job 7 days a week, is going on his pumping route. And there's guys out there that they do that, right? They go to the well, they pull tickets, they write things down, they report it back to the office. Whoever that person is in the office writes it down in the books, and at the end of the month they ship it off to the state, to the regulators. And so, sometimes it's a really small operation, and so, obviously when there's more red tape, there's a lot more opportunity. Typically they're flaring a lot more gas. They have a lot greater flare permits because they have a lot more significant operations, a lot more, they're producing a lot more crude oil. And so it's one of those things where oil, from where I stand, I think some of the smaller mom and pop operators have a little bit of an advantage to getting set up because they have less red tape to cut, right? They're cut, like, to them, they could take this risk, right? Buy a little Bitcoin mine, right? Maybe, and they don't need to start big. They could start, 50 kilowatts, 100 kilowatts, right? Potentially $100,000, right? We could say. And so it's not insane money. And, they could start with that, and, they don't really need to worry about like insuring it because they're out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and it's right next to their house, and like, nobody's going to screw with it. You know what I mean? Like, and they're just more doing this as a test for themselves, and they don't need to really ask anybody's permission, right? It's their land, it's their mineral rights. Like, whereas these other companies, they need to check with like, all departments and the accounting department and make sure that they can even deal with Bitcoin. And some of them can't. And so they come back and they're like, okay, well, maybe we can do some type of a joint venture where we own, the power generation equipment, and we essentially do a PPA agreement, and somebody else brings in the Bitcoin miners and the buildings, right? But our investors, our executive team doesn't want to touch Bitcoin or hardware or any of that magic internet money shit. So like,
or the insurance company,
drops them, right? And so we're kind of at that place where, I think the bigger companies they're definitely obviously taking a look, but they have more steps, more hoops to jump through. The smaller companies, they were quicker to do this anyway in the beginning. And that was primarily our customer, certainly in the early days. But now I think the bigger producers are catching up, right? I mean, they're never behind real for very long, and they always catch up really fast, right? Like that's just how they come in. They come in usually really heavy, and I think they're just getting their toes wet right now, and we'll see them really get serious here in the next 2.5, 3 years. We'll start seeing like serious, headlines and serious money get allocated, because they already allocated the 2021 budget before Bitcoin mooned, right? And so like they weren't going back and changing money and stuff. Like, so like it's going to be a 2022, 2023 thing, right? And so like I think honestly, like they're getting their feet wet. They reallocated some funds because they have to check this out, because this is, Bitcoin's mooning, and this is, some technology that they need to see now. But I don't think they're going to get real serious until we see, honestly, we're going to need to see some maturation on the hardware side of things as well, right? The ASIC industry is a joke right now. It's a Mickey Mouse industry, as my boss once said, and I thought was very precise. It's just childish right now. It's just a joke. It's like there's just a million middlemen. Everyone's marking up 1,000,000%. It's the prices change every minute of the day. It's nuts. It's absolutely, and we need to commoditize ASIC. We've got to push that. It's just, it takes so much money. It's just so massive. It's like I'm shouting, I'm yelling at the clouds here. So
it's gonna take a while to get the foundries up and running at a minimum.
A while is probably not even like the right term, right? Like that's what's upsetting, is it's just more.
It's very frustrating. That's a slow moving train wreck in and of itself. I'm still trying to get my head around what a well is and what that means economically. So, because when I think about the oil and gas industry, I mean, I think about going to the pump, and I think about Exxon, Mobil, Amoco. I mean, I'm just thinking huge operations, right?
Right.
And so you mentioned like someone's got maybe a well on their property, maybe it's a family well. I don't know if it's just been in the family for a long time, but what kind of numbers is that? Is that pumping out millions of dollars worth of value a year? And where are they where are they selling or distributing the product?
Okay, here's the thing. So It's a great question. And I think I can break it down for you real simply, and maybe this will kind of help people think about it. So one thing is, it's really not hard to get to $1 million a year on a well. Considering that's like $3,000 a day, right? If something makes $3,000 a day, $1 million a year. And so if you look at the price of oil, what are we at? $65 a barrel, $70 a barrel right now. So what you need, 50 barrels of oil to like
Get to the
produce
$3
$1
grand.
million, produce
Yeah.
$1 million a year. And so 50 barrels of oil. Now that's a lot of oil. I mean, that's a good bit of oil if you know what a barrel is. But at the end of the day, like there's some wells where they're just maybe dripping 10 barrels of oil a day. And so it's like, that might not sound like much, but it's like, well, that's $700 a day. Like it's, it's $250,000 a year. And some of these families or these, small companies, they might have 10 of these things, right? And so it's like, holy crap, they're making, $6-7 million bucks a year. So like, yeah, they could be fairly substantial wells. It could also be maybe less so, where it's like, the thing's more like a barrel or two a day. And so it's like, okay, well, this thing is like kind of like passive income, like minimum wage, almost passive income, like maybe 35, 40 grand a year. Obviously, like there's taxes on that. You have to pay taxes on the oil you produce even before you sell it, because it's, obviously got to be sold. It's but you get taxed at the pump. And so, or you get taxed at the wellhead, I mean. And so, I for some of the small oil and gas operators, they look at this well, that's like, hey, this well's been making us 40 grand, and they've been flaring maybe 40 or 50,000 cubic feet of gas off of it per day, maybe 20,000 cubic feet of gas off of it per day. And you can look at Bitcoin mining and say, hey, if you came in and generated power with just that little bit of gas that you're burning, and especially if you put newer computers on this well, which, I mean, you don't have to, but but if you did put the newer computers, like you could potentially be making an extra $500 to $1,000 a day on this well, right? Like, so it's like, whoa, this could actually be better than our oil. Like we're going to make more money on this well. Like this well used to make us 47 grand oil, $0 gas. It's about to make, 80, 90, 100 grand gas, 200 grand gas, and 40 grand oil. Like, holy crap. Like this is an entirely new revenue, passive revenue stream for us. This is, changes our entire lifestyle. And so like for some of the small oil and gas operators, the risk is a lot more worth it. Whereas you look at these bigger oil and gas companies, the guys, that maybe are, more suit and tie, they've got a couple of levels down in the skyscraper, whatever downtown that they're in. Like they can't risk looking like idiots. You know what I mean? Like if they do this and it fails, they look dumber than they look smart if it succeeds, because it's like, oh, well, what you risked a whole bunch of this magic internet money, and what we're making an extra like $1,000 a day. Like this company makes $300 million a year, man. Like what the hell were you thinking? And so like that's kind of where I see just kind of in the nuanced aspect of all the little decisions that get made when it comes to doing this, where I see the small operators they're like quicker to just be like, honestly, yeah, like that's worth giving it a shot. And then what happens is, like, we've had some small oil and gas operators, I've said this before, I mean, they call it it's like breeding rabbits, right? They just keep rolling their profits in, and next thing they know, they've got 12 Bitcoin mines, right? Because most of these guys have enough gas to produce a lot of power, megawatts of power, but they don't have the capital to produce megawatts of power, right? They don't have the capital to just start off by saying, like, let's produce 5 megawatts. Like, no, so they start off with 200 kilowatts, and then they reinvest profits. They get another 200 kilowatts, reinvest on, maybe they get a 400 kilowatt, and now they're almost at a megawatt. And then 3 years later, next thing you know, they're like 2.5 megawatts over 5 well sites, 6 well sites, and like it's crushing their oil production in terms of the monetary aspect, right? And what it comes down to is they're able to do more now with the exact same amount of hydrocarbons, the exact same amount of oil and gas. They're bringing in more value, right? It's an increase of efficiency. Waste is mitigated. It's a beautiful thing, and it doesn't take them long to really start to see how Bitcoin might actually have some value if this is how it's produced, right? Like, wait, so you're talking about somebody has to like give raw electricity to this network in order to produce Bitcoin, rather than the dollar where it's just some unelected official can, turn on the money printer to a $3, $5, $10 trillion tune, and nobody can say anything about it. Like nobody can stop them. Nobody can vote them out of office. We can't do shit. And so it's really kind of liberating when you understand it, but they don't really need to understand Bitcoin in order to understand how this helps them. And so I think that'll come later, right? They'll start to value Bitcoin as they use it and as they interact with it. Because these aren't really guys that are going to ever get Bitcoin's thesis. They're really not. Like no matter how compelling the argument, the thing that's going to compel them the most is Bitcoin's price and interacting with it, right? And realizing exactly how it's produced, and that, and they'll see that nobody pulls the strings, because heck, if you want to try to inflate the supply or manipulate this thing, you have to get millions of cubic feet of gas. Like they know how hard that is. They understand the difficulty it would take to try to like inflate the monetary supply or something, right? To try to run through blocks. And so I don't know. It seems to be a natural marriage, in my opinion. Like these two industries are going to come together and they're going to find harmony. I think the petroleum engineers are going to absolutely love Bitcoin, and they're going to become some of the most staunchest Bitcoin advocates, some of the staunchest orange-pilled evangelizers, as I've heard some of the critics call people, right? Try to make it cultish. Like we're evangelizing for a sound money, right? We're evangelizing for a fair playing field, for God's sake.
Yeah, and they're sitting there on wasted empty bullets that would just.
Oh my gosh, I know.
So that's kind of what I want to get at here is, I think there's this notion, maybe if you're from the cities or the Northeast or whatever you want to call it, that, like farmers aren't that smart, or, there's kind of, just that it's not economically prosperous, that, and I think you and I both know that's silly and foolish and maybe a wild misnomer. But so what I'm kind of curious about is, how, you mentioned career risk, and, up in sort of the corporate offices, there's a lot of career risk to getting involved in Bitcoin mining. But, how much of the oil and gas operators at the smaller level are mavericks, are just dynamic thinkers? Like, what you're getting at there, with all the math they have to crunch and the numbers they have to run to figure out whether something's going to be profitable or not. I'm assuming most people aren't just sitting on that family well and getting whatever they can out of it. But, is it like something like where, I don't know, is it like There Will Be Blood, the movie, where, I mean,
well, I think, yeah, I mean,
and what I'm finally getting at is, because in some regards, this is, let's call it maybe more semblance of the old Wild Wild West. It is the West. And I think people do intuitively, or, naturally understand freedom and liberty. And so as number goes up, I think the oil and gas industry could conceivably take over Bitcoin mining with all the amount of wasted energy that they're just sitting on, and be a powerhouse in the future of capital ownership and going from black gold to digital gold.
I mean, I agree with you in that. I agree with you in many respects there, right? One thing I'll say is, to your initial point, it's kind of funny you say, that oftentimes people have the same kind of, I guess, biased or stereotype about farmers or agricultural workers, right? Which is funny.
They lumber plumbers or whatever it is, blue collar,
of any sort. Yeah,
and those could be the most entrepreneurial minded and economically prosperous small businesses in the nation.
Yeah, and I mean, I went to college out in farm country, right? I went to college out in Sioux County, Iowa, in a town of like 5,000 people, and so, I've lived firsthand with some of some of the people that grow the world's corn, if you will, right? The U.S.'s corn, and no, they're some of the smartest people I've ever interacted with, right? Certainly some of the most self-disciplined and driven people. And they're smarter than hell. Absolutely. I mean, certainly some of the agricultural science. I mean, these guys were far beyond my intellect, and they might have been considered simpletons in some sort, right? Maybe because of their slang or the way that they, reference things, right? Like, it's crack a cold one in the sticks kind of a thing, right? Like somebody would snub their nose at that. Meanwhile, they don't realize this is one of the most intelligent human beings in the room. The oil and gas industry is no different. And I would say that it doesn't matter the size of the oil and gas industry. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of petroleum engineers at the larger oil and gas industry, oil and gas companies that they are probably more in an office job, and it probably kills them, right? They probably wish they were more out in the field doing things. But what they like to do is they look at data all day, right? They look at production data all day, and that's what really they make decisions on is, hey, we're at this pressure, and we have this casing pressure, this tubing pressure, and so based upon our historical numbers, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna maximize, and then we're gonna inject again. And like these guys they're just almost as much artists as they are mechanical engineers and scientists, right? And so I think they're not given nearly as much credit, but they just know the nightmare and like the budgetary kind of red tape that's going to take place to even get this kind of a thing going. So some of that, but even them, they're like, we're at the point now where they're coming forward and they're getting their feet wet and getting a Bitcoin mine. The oil and gas, the small mom and pop, certainly much more, you could call them wildcatters, right? Which is the there will be blood, the people that literally just headed out west to drill a hole and hopefully they got rich, right? Because if they struck oil, they could put it on freaking Rockefeller's trains and get rich and ship it back east, right? And I think there's kind of a digital wildcatter thing going on now, right? Where, and I mean, I mentioned this back in 2018, and it sounded hilarious. Really back then, it sounds kind of corny right now, right? But the idea that there's this whole group of people now, right, myself included, and all the people I'm talking to every day, who have gone out and we're seeking out stranded and waste energy sources, and we're monetizing them, right? We're finding ways in which to bring a use to them, which is effectively, right, selling them to the Bitcoin network, and we're getting rewarded via profit for that effort, right, for that risk. And it's no guarantee, like you said, a lot. I mean, shit happens, right? Especially in the oil field, like we're literally talking about combusting natural gas. That's oftentimes, this is like wellhead gas, right? This is gas. It's coming straight from 5, 4, 7,000 feet below the ground right into the engine and combusting. Like this, this isn't a guarantee, but I think it's worthwhile risk, and we've got really incredible minds and incredible technology to do this, right? This is not rocket science, but it's also just a natural evolution, I think, of energy production, where so now we have a new place to sell electricity, the Bitcoin network. Right? We have humans, and now we have the Bitcoin network, right? Pretty much it was just humans before. And now the Bitcoin network is this autonomous thing, right? There's no counterparty. It's almost not like you're even selling it to a human. You're selling it to, right? There's no counter. There's nobody else on the counter side of that trade. It was pre-programmed 12 years ago to pay out, rewards to you if you found a block. And so, I mean, if anything, like maybe Satoshi Nakamoto is on the other side of that trade, right? The Bitcoin network's on the other side of that trade, but it's an autonomous thing that nobody controls. And so, very interesting, right? I mean, a 16-year-old, a freaking 15-year-old kid can wake up, talk to nobody, literally doesn't even have to pick up the phone, might need an email address, but that's about it. An email address and a Bitcoin address. And they could sell, $20 million a day of electricity to the Bitcoin network and get paid for it, and nobody can stop them. They don't have to ask anybody's permission, right? There's no gatekeepers to this. It's wild, right? It's really, when you think about it that way, it's really fascinating. It's like, wow, I could, talk about the possibility, first of all, of like energy theft, which has already taken place, like on a crazy degree. There was guys that were like using a nuclear power in Russia. They were stealing it and they went to jail. But like, I think what it's going to do is we're going to see electricity and energy become more properly priced around the world. It's going to be this global arbitrage of energy, the cost of energy, in order as a consumer, right? Because it'll constantly be competing with the Bitcoin network, whether you're a hydroelectric facility or natural gas facility. The Bitcoin network is going to be this option you could always be selling to. And so if the alternative isn't as attractive, or if the alternative is way more attractive, then you'll stop mining Bitcoin and you'll sell them more. You sell this market more electricity, because you're going to follow your incentives. You're going to follow what maximizes your return and optimizes your your point of equilibrium.
Yeah. It's really interesting how you break it down. It's just selling electricity to the Bitcoin network. And that really simplifies it and demystifies it in a lot of regards. You mentioned that, electricity only was, the humans were the only market before, and now Bitcoin network is a market. And I wonder if down the road, machines will be, a market. And even if I say like with smart contracts, I don't even mean decentralized smart contracts, but just if machines have contracts to pay out for energy or use or whatever, and micro payments, but I jumped to one of your tweets that you put out recently. It's crazy to think about how approximately 90% of all Bitcoin have already been mined. So the largest energy producers and most powerful governments from around the world will compete for the last 10%, approximately 2.15 million Bitcoin, over the next 120 years. What a time to be alive. That's what really made me think how, the oil and gas industry and all energy producers are just well positioned to capitalize on those remaining Bitcoin, which
I think that's kind of our thesis at Upstream Data, is what we saw, right? We're much more of an oil and gas company, I think, than we are a Bitcoin mining company. That being said, we're definitely, a Bitcoin company. But really, we saw the opportunity. I think Steve saw the opportunity that, the oil and gas producers are best fit to compete when it comes to mining Bitcoin. Like, they are absolutely in the best position to mine the longest, right? They can mine to the lowest price, especially those who have excess energy dense waste, right? Because when you're mitigating a waste source, you have no reason to ever turn that Bitcoin mine off, no matter how uneconomic it becomes. Now, there is a point where you don't want to invest in that Bitcoin mine, right? Because the return on it is like pretty much shit, right? It's like, hey, well, if it costs us 100 grand to set up the Bitcoin mine and it's only going to make us $1 a day, like, honestly, like, I don't even want to buy the Bitcoin mine. Like, I'll just I'll go, deploy my $100,000 of capital elsewhere and get a better return. But if you already have a Bitcoin mine deployed, you have no reason to turn it off. There's absolutely no reason to shut it off if it's on a flare or a vent gas source, right? So the price of Bitcoin crashed all the way to $100. You have you turning it off doesn't save you anything. And so, in fact, it ends up costing you extra. So you might as well continue to mine, continue to contribute to the network. And, maybe you don't sell, right? Like, at that point, because maybe you hold on to the thing and wait until it gets to a price where, it was worth it. It was more worth it, right, to have mined it. And so that kind of change, I think, when I realized that, right, because I was working in the oil and gas industry, that's when I realized, like, okay, well, inevitably Bitcoin mining is gonna head here, whether it's the oil and gas industry that wakes up to this technology and begins to integrate it, or it's Bitcoin miners like myself who just come swarm this industry and figure it out for them and offer a service, right? Which is inevitable, which is kind of the difference between, I think, Upstream Data's business model and maybe some of the other known companies out there. Like, I think, Great American Mining is an awesome company. One cool thing about them is, even if we were direct competitors, which I don't really think we are, even if we were, like, there's way more than enough gas to go around. So it's like nobody's even really competing at this point anyway. Like, there's so much gas. But beyond that, like, I think Great American Mining model is more like to come in and provide Bitcoin mining as a service to the oil and gas companies, so they bring the equipment. I think they're taking risk on that. I'm not really sure, but at Upstream Data, we more, at least certainly of late, we're more on the side of, we sell the infrastructure, we sell the Bitcoin mines, the computers, the engines, and we teach them how to operate it. Yeah, we offer like a little bit of a monthly service in terms of like a little bit of a monitoring, but it's very, very minimal. Just a little bit of hand holding, you could call it. And then they're off and running, right? It's their Bitcoin mine. We don't really hear from them. We don't get like a recurring revenue from them. We sold them the infrastructure, and then the idea, our goal, right, is that when they're successful, they're going to come back and ask to build a lot more buildings, right? And we build buildings for a profit. We build engines for a profit. And so that's what we're looking to do, right? Is build out these tools that we know this industry is going to end up leveraging. And so in that way, we don't compete with a whole lot of people, because we're not scrambling out there looking to get gas. We know where there's plenty of liability gas production that we could tap into whenever we wanted. We're also mining as a company, right? Of course. I mean, it's something that we've been doing for a while, probably since the beginning. But we're not we're not that kind of a model where we're not going out and like it's our Bitcoin mines all over, right? We have 125, 130 deployments or something to date. Bitcoin mines deployed to North America. Like we're not able to manage all of those. They're all over the place, right? From Marcellus Basin all the way to Powder River to the DJ to down in the Permian, all over the place. So like it's just a matter of what to us is kind of the path of least resistance, as well as inevitably on a long enough time horizon, these oil and gas companies, it makes sense for them to leverage this technology themselves. I think it does make sense for some Bitcoin miners to come in and like do some joint ventures. I think there's definitely plenty of room for that, but inevitably these guys are going to get comfortable taking this risk themselves, and they're not going to need anybody else they're not going to need anybody else's money. I mean, because they already have banking relationships, they already take significant risk, right? This is just going to become normal to them.
Yeah. So take us out to, a well or an ONG site where you guys are implementing one of these structures. What is going on? Like, how is that site hectic? Is it dangerous? Are you working with them during implementation? And how big are these buildings that you guys are dropping on the site? How loud are they? What kind of upkeep or just kind of, maintenance to require?
No, so I mean, oil and gas site's pretty, it's actually pretty simple. It's not as chaotic, I think, as people think it is. Like, it's not like an offshore drilling rig where like people are screaming and like things are flying or something waves are crashing. It's not like that at all. It's really simple. When you're out in an oil field, like predominantly produce three things, right? You produce oil, gas, and water, and they all come up and then they get separated, and the oil gets, pushed over after the separator and gets put into the tanks. And then the water, gets over and it gets, either cleaned out and then disposed of, and they have water, treatment and whatever they do there. And then the gas, if they're out in the middle of nowhere and they have no pipeline to sell the gas, then the gas gets broken out and typically, plumbed over however far away and goes up to a flare stack and they just burn it, right? And so what happens with our infrastructure comes in, we just essentially drop a building, one of our hash outs, which can be anywhere from 8 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet tall, to 8 feet by 40 feet by 8 feet tall, right? So it could be, a pretty big building, 40 feet wide, about the size of a full-on shipping container, or it can be a lot smaller than that. And then next to it will sit an engine, right? And these engines, depending upon the size of the engine, right? If it's a 500 kilowatt or a 400, 500 kilowatt engine, it could be as big as kind of like a mobile home, it's big, right? It's like a, I don't know, like it looks like a military, like the size of a military vehicle of sorts, right? But it's still, the footprint is relatively smaller. I mean, compared to like a pipeline, like when you're talking about, a pipeline that's going to be buried and, like for a few miles or like this is pretty simple and it's portable, right? You can move it whenever you need to. So you don't have to worry about like demolition and having a permanent structure that you have to tear down and all that kind of shit and all the licensing and crap that comes with a permanent structure and all that, certification kind of stuff. And so there's just a lot of pragmatism to doing it this way. And then, they set that engine down and they plumb into the flare line, right? So it's just a matter of, making sure to pull off of that flare line, step the gas down to the correct pressure so that it's feeding the engine at a correct pressure. And then boom, you're fueling up the engine, right? And then that engine will light up and electrify the Bitcoin mine, the hash hut. And then from there, a lot of things can be controlled remotely, right? You can change mining pools, you can restart machines, we even have it where we can like remotely control the engine on our smaller scale deployments. And so some of our 50 kilowatt, 100 kilowatt deployments, we can restart engines from 1,000 miles away and have them cycle down, cycle back up, just because sometimes like that happens, right? We're much like with an internet router, right? Where sometimes like unplugging it and plugging it back in solves everything. Like it just does, like you don't know why, it just does. It just clears all the traffic on all like the RAM or all of the access memory. And like, but when something is, a 3-hour drive away, like to have to pay somebody to drive out there to unplug, like you can't do that. So like being able to remotely do that sometimes can make the difference. And so, all that stuff we're innovating around and we've provided solutions for, at least in some capacity. Sometimes it doesn't really make sense because you've got somebody visiting the well every day anyway, right? And so they're going to be there to check on the engine, check on the hash hut. And then maintaining the hash shot's pretty much nothing. I mean, it's you have to blow out the intake filters, maybe once a month to maybe 4 times a year, like depending upon how dusty the conditions are wherever you're mining, right? Sometimes in West Texas, you could probably talk about like once a month because they've got, windy days and people are plowing fields and shitloads of particles in the air. But maybe up in Wyoming, it's not as bad, right?
Got it. Well, if you could describe the problem or the opportunity here with flared and wasted gas, and also maybe elaborate on how bad is this stuff really for the environment. And I question that because, like, some states you can flare as much as you want. Some states they'll cap you. I wonder,
Right.
well, if one state's capping and your neighbor's not, like, to what effect are you really achieving any of your goals?
It's a good question. Put it this way. In terms of the opportunity, right? I think that was the first part of your question was what's the opportunity here? Seemingly fucking endless. Okay, like I don't know how I can stress this enough. Is the opportunity is seemingly endless to? Oh, sorry, I'll throw a light back on myself. Seemingly endless to go out and find an economic power source, primary energy source in the oil field. There's enough wasted gas every day just in the United States. I've said this so many times, but I think it's enough to like power the network. We could probably, I think conservatively speaking, like 2, 3, 4 times over. I think if we looked at probably what the actual numbers are in the United States, it's probably a little bit more than that. North America, if we include Canada, if we include Central America, we're talking about, probably closer to 7, 8 times over. And then globally, who the hell knows? I mean, it's got to be 15, 20, 25 times potentially, because the reported numbers are insane. So the real numbers are probably even more insane, right? Like, I mean, like, is Russia accurately reporting exactly how many cubic feet of methane that it's flaring? No. Is Nigeria? No. Iran? Don't think so. Saudi? Nope. I mean, even if they're all a part of the Paris Climate Accord, I don't care. They're all lying. And I'll go on record saying this. I love the oil and gas industry. Some of the absolute best human beings I've ever worked with are there. That's why I love working in this industry and love working with these people. But even them, they can't be 100% precise and accurate with the numbers that they report because it's really hard to be, right? Like, it's very difficult to actually know exactly how much gas you burned, right? Like, you can set up meters here and here and here. Like, you can meter the gas after, out of the separator, and you can meter it here. So you can get these readings, but then it's like, okay, well, how accurate were your meters, right? Like, were your meters calibrated to the altitude that you're at? Like this is, there is science to this, but it's, I'll say this, I bet you they get pretty damn close, but there's a whole lot of gas that gets vented and flared that goes unreported. Trust me, because they're not incentivized to report it. So I imagine they avoid reporting it whenever possible. Put it that way. And so the actual numbers, I think, are probably quite even more staggering than the reported ones. It's seemingly endless opportunity. In terms of, I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
How bad is this stuff really for the environment? Just
okay.
Trying to frame that up in terms of people are making efforts, some people aren't. And so if some people aren't, I'm just kind of understand how bad is this stuff for the environment? What kind of impact are we having here?
I'd say with a flare, when gas is being flared, a lot less impact. Like, that's not insanely terrible for the environment. Okay, the reason I say that is because when you combust methane, CH4, what you're left with is carbon dioxide and water vapor, right? So the same thing you and I are exhaling, right? Now, some people would say carbon dioxide is awful. I would say I don't really think it's as awful as some people think. I'd say methane is a ton worse, right? The air quality impact that methane has on the environment, significant, right? And if you want to look at it from like a greenhouse gas, like a warming point of view, which you would look at the molecular weight, right? The molecular density of what we're talking about. CH4 is like anywhere, 40 to 70 times worse than carbon dioxide. So flaring is better than venting. So anywhere that gas is just being vented, which by the way, there's a lot of venting going on in Canada. Like venting is bad. Like I'd say that there's a significant air quality impact, and it's just a really, really kind of lackadaisical or really obviously negligent practice, in my opinion, right? Especially now that we have a means by which to, like, you might as well at least burn it, right? Like, it's like, hey, if you're venting, like, you might as well at least like freaking light it on fire, because then at least it just turns into carbon dioxide and water vapor, right? And it's not nearly as bad. So venting is just nonsensical in my mind, and there's absolutely no excuse for it anymore. Especially, I mean, if the gas is extremely sour, I'd say even then it's worth probably looking into what it takes to generate power with that gas, what it takes to treat that gas, because you could have a viable opportunity here, right? We have a market now. And so at least you might be able to break even and provide an environmental service. And so like I think that there's some nuance there. Sometimes, I think if you're going in and you're mitigating a flare, there's definitely an environmental impact, because when you do operate a flare, there are conditions by which sometimes that flare isn't very efficient, right? So if it's really windy outside, as an example, if it's like 40, 50 mile an hour, 60 mile an hour gust of wind, which happen oftentimes in North Dakota, Wyoming, West Texas, that flare sometimes can only be maybe 50% efficient. And so it'll actually be spewing methane. It'll be venting about half of the methane that's going through it, right? Or it's actually only combusting about 50% of the gas that's going through it. Now it'll look like it's burning maybe everything, but what you don't see is there's a shitload of methane spewing and not being combusted, right? And so, I think that there's a pretty strong argument for, hey, taking that gas, internally combusting it inside of an engine, you're definitely you're combusting 100% of that gas and turning it into carbon dioxide and water vapor. Like, there's no methane escaping when you're running it through an engine, right? And so in that, you could certainly argue that internal combustion is superior environmentally to external combustion or exterior combustion, right?
Yeah. So I kind of lost my train of thought there. I'm just kind of, I want to read one of your quotes from Twitter again, about whether, about wind turbines. And, you mentioned wind turbines are made from an epoxy resin, a petroleum product that won't degrade for many lifetimes. Never wouldn't be too accurate a word to use, really. Wind turbines are subsidized monstrosities, a telling symptom of the fiat disease. And I regained my thought. And it's just sort of like, do you think the free market should just, decide the winners and losers here? What I mean by that is deregulation. We're flaring, but we're venting. We don't really know. I think that when I say the free market will decide the winners and losers is, those that capture the most flared and vented gas and put it towards Bitcoin mining will be more economically prosperous and more sustainable than those that don't. And those that don't will eventually turn their eyes towards how well the people that are doing that, And so I think that problem solves itself, possibly through that mechanism. And then, we have the other side of the coin where, we have all these arguments and fiat incentives to make wind turbines or solar energy which aren't really necessarily a net positive. I think the jury's out on that. So what do you make of the moralization of everything, including energy? And what the atmosphere of the dialogue is like right now, because you work at the heart of the industry.
Yeah, I think there's a few different points here that are important to kind of touch on. And so, like, one is this, like, one is that the moralization of the consumption of energy and the production of energy, I think, is just flawed inherently, right? It's to say that, like, somehow this watt of electricity is more virtuous than this watt based upon where it was generated. I think that that's just inherently flawed. Back to my tweet about the wind turbines, let me say this too. And, like, I've gotten some people that say, like, that think I'm some, like, staunch hater of all intermittent power generation, right? Which would be wind, solar. And I'm not. I mean, I think wind is pretty much a monstrosity. I don't really know where there's much wind application that I would say is, like, maybe Antarctica. I think there's some, like literally there's just, like, consistent times where you got 60 mile an hour wind in Antarctica, but you have temperature problem, these turbines freeze and shit. And so, and like who's going to be there to consume it? Well, now we've got the Bitcoin network, so maybe you could mine down in Antarctica with wind turbines, right? But like, I think that there's some great applications to solar. Don't get me wrong. I think solar is awesome technology. I'm going to own solar. For off grid, it's fantastic. I think that it's not superior to fossil fuels. I don't think it's superior to coal or natural gas in terms of power generation. I don't think that it's realistic to talk about like flipping a switch and the whole world all of a sudden runs on quote unquote green energy now, because much to my point in my tweet, the quote, the renewable or the intermittent power, wind and solar, are reliant upon the fossil fuel industry, right? Like, I mean, you're not going to mine for the rare earth minerals that you need to produce solar panels with a solar powered bulldozer. You're not going to ship it across an ocean in a solar powered or wind powered barge, right? You're not going to, there's going to be fossil fuels in the process of manufacturing, maintaining, and not only just like erecting and maintaining, but also demolishing, right? And disassembling and destroying. We're trying to recycle this infrastructure. We're not going to get rid of it. Like this whole idea of like, we're just going to be done with fossil fuels by 2030 is laughable. I mean, that's like, what about steel? What about concrete? Like, what are we like? I mean, it's just virtue signaling, right? It's not based in reality. It's not based in science. It's not based in innovation. That being said, I really think like solar can be really cool. Like it can be a great, certainly an awesome part of an individual's energy stack, right? If I, my own personal house, like I hope to have solar as an option as well, right? Because that's great, but I also want to maybe have a diesel generator out back, right? Like, or a nat gas generator of some sort, or a propane, or hell, a freaking coal fire. Give me a coal fire generator. Like, optionality is my best friend, and so I don't see why we would weaken our power grid, right? And which is what we've done in the United States by reducing the amount of fossil fuels on the energy stack. We've weakened it, right? Because honestly, wind and solar are not as reliable. They're not as durable. And I mean, coal, like this thing people don't understand about coal is it's really an amazing way to store energy. It is so freaking energy dense, okay, that you can have just like a mountain of coal in a barn. And if all the other energy in town, like if the wind turbines freeze and the solar panels freeze, you can just open the doors to the barn, start shoveling coal into the coal fire engine, and everybody's back to electrified, like fucking that, right? And it just sits there. It's just a pile of potential energy, incredibly energy dense. But no, like when Texas goes to shit, we're not going to do that because it's bad for the environment. So what do people end up doing? They end up burning their couches and their freaking, nightstands and shit. Like, what's the emissions from that? I mean, so it just becomes, it almost becomes an argument where it seems as though those who are championing the like get rid of fossil fuels, they almost begin when you start looking into the numbers, they almost start to forfeit the fact that the numbers aren't really sustainable by intermittent power generation. And they start kind of edging toward the fact they're like, yeah, you're right. Like, we're probably going to have to consume less. Right. And I'm like, no, like what? Like, energy consumption is directly proportionate to quality of life, like all throughout history. And if you think that we need to revert back to like the 19th century, because like in the name of, in the name of keeping the polar ice caps from just melting, like, I just disagree with you fundamentally. I do not think that our energy consumption is going to cause an extinction event of mankind via the weather or something. Like, I just don't believe that. And so that's the thing, is people be like, oh, well, it's happening. Like, we're 10 years out, we're all going to die. And you're killing us because you don't believe. And it's like, they moralize it at you, right? They shame you and turn you into a villain. They vilify you and literally put the entire fate of the human race on your head because you disagree with how you think electricity is going to be produced and distributed around the world in the future. I mean, it's pure emotion. right? It has nothing to do with intellectual honesty. It has nothing to do with fact or truth. It has everything to do with emotion and virtue.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I'll take the counter side of that, though, in terms of I think when you mentioned 2030, I think about the Great Reset, and I do think that the mindset or the framework of that is not to raise everyone's standard of living and to continue growing ours, but to actually bring everyone to the same standard of living by reducing those in the West and primarily in the U.S. And so I think that it's counterintuitive. I mean, we don't want to lower our standard of living. We're going to need more energy to increase our standard of living, but I don't think that's the goal or the agenda of that.
Well, the goal
narrative.
is to save the planet.
Yeah, and I think it's through whether it's not necessarily whether they're going to save the planet, but I think they're going to take away fossil fuel sources and leave you with less energy production by either not building more wind and solar or just not replacing it.
There's no losing for them, right? Because
Correct.
Here's the thing: every year that we're alive, they can say like, "Look, it's because we did all of these measures. That's the only we're prolonging it, right? But it's next year we're going to die unless we do these." And then here's the thing: if everything does end up going to shit, and like every time there's a natural disaster, they're like, "See, we told you you got to pay us more tax dollars, otherwise the weather's going to keep fucking up." And it's like I can't believe people buy this shit. It's just unbelievable to me that the solution that people have bought into literally is that tax dollars will solve the climate.
Well, I think I think you blew my mind when you mentioned that, the climate, the carbon credits and things of this nature is just really to create another column, in the accounting tables.
That's it.
On the balance sheet and the income statement. And it hides fiat losses and fiat negligence. These are your words or your thoughts. I'm just paraphrasing. Through accounting tricks. And that just benefits the owners of capital who own these huge corporations who get to use these tricks. And it's not about reality or saving the environment. But
it's really not about saving the planet either.
Yeah, but it does keep those zombie companies humming along.
Humming, and they're booming. I mean, look at what's that electric truck company that it's like a the competitor to Tesla. Hold on, oh my gosh, man, they're absolutely this is hilarious because I was looking at their balance sheet the other day, and no, it wasn't these guys. And it's Nikola. That's what it is. Instead of Tesla, it's Nikola. Like you look at
instead of CIA, it's NSA.
So like, look at this. I'm looking at this, right? Their key stats of their company: revenue the last 12 months, $0. Revenue growth year over year, minus 100%. Gross profit 12 months, negative $6 million. Net profit the last 12 months, negative $500 million, negative 528 million. Today's volume in trades, 9 million shares. Freaking, what is their market capacity? Their share price is at like $10. Their market cap is $4 billion. They haven't brought in a single dollar in 12 months. They're worth $4 billion. What the fuck? I mean, what the fuck does that? I mean, what does that even mean? They haven't delivered a single truck to market. Net profit, $500 million loss. It's a $4 billion company. I mean, what are we talking? Like, this is just an accounting scam. This is just a gigantic accounting scam. Why is that company shouldn't exist? But here we are, right? And I just think it's a true bastardization of incentives. And when you bastardize incentives, which is one of the things the government does best, right? When government intervenes in a marketplace, what do? They screw up incentives and they create deadweight loss, right? When you create deadweight loss, there's true pain. There's true impact from deadweight loss and damage that incurs from that, right? I think that some of it's to the point where it's immeasurable, where you start, you could try to account for what's the value of a person leaving an industry like power generation, where maybe they would work on innovating, either a new natural gas engine that is used at a compressor station, like some of the ones here in Colorado that give me electricity right at my house. like what's the loss there? Because when those people just end up going and doing something like buying an oyster farm to collect, $100 million a year of carbon credits because they're sequestering carbon by owning an oyster farm. Because I know stories of that. Like I know guys who have left jobs where they were truly contributing value to the world, like and
Yeah.
innovating, and they're incentivized to just like go sit somewhere and collect carbon credits and play literally just play the number game and get richer than hell. And I'm almost saying, like, to me, where like I get incentivized. I'm laying in bed like, shit, what if I went and bought a property and just started planting trees? Like, would they have to give me carbon credits? Like, I can go sell those to some company that has to buy carbon credits in order to be carbon neutral, so that they go into this tax bracket. So they spend $1 million on carbon credits and it saves them $5 million in tax dollars. So it's a $4 million win to go buy these carbon. And so like they pay me $1 million and it saves them 4 million. Everybody's getting rich. Like, it's just a scam, man. It's just like this. It's all in the name of we're saving the planet. I mean, what a whacked out world we're in today, right? Where, I mean, the government freaking pioneered the shitcoin, right? I mean, like these shitcoin companies, these vaporware tokens, they're copy paste of the old system that's been in place which was instituted in 1971 when we left the gold standard. And certainly when we started entering carbon credits into this game, my God, did it get screwed up. So that's what I'm excited about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to start shattering a lot of these gatekeepers, a lot of these kind of regulatory moats. And at the end of the day, every single energy producer, every single power producer can just make the decision to begin exporting their energy to the Bitcoin network. Obviously right now it's not that easy because there's a step in there that I'm not mentioning, right? You have to turn your energy into computational work. And so you have to get ASICs, you have to get these computer chips. And there's this significant immaturity in that side of the business. But certainly as that side begins to mature, and I'd say, by the end of this decade, Bitcoin mining is going to be so pervasive throughout energy production, the entire energy stack, upstream, midstream, downstream, all of it, that there'll be no regulating it out, right? To regulate it out would be to destroy all energy industry within the country.
Yeah. Well, the financialization of America, the American economy is, a heist of unreal proportions. And what I was thinking about when you were talking there is just that it's not even just, the hollowing out of the manufacturing economy, but, the smartest minds in the country, for whatever you want to say academia is, or colleges, universities, but the brightest minds tend to go into finance now, because they can
go to banking.
Go into banking, and you can, create and fabricate your way into a lot of wealth. And not only can you, that's where the money is for young, bright people, but then we're incentivizing them to believe in the way the economy is structured. And it's just a massive feedback loop. So Wall Street was really just, really key, I think, to the solidification of what happened in 1971 with going off the gold standard. I'm kind of curious what you think then of, or how has Bitcoin maybe changed you, and what's your take or outlook on where we're going? All things considered, the conversation we've had, the fiat economy, and the moralization of energy, and what's your outlook going forward?
We'll say there's no doubt Bitcoin has kind of made me a little more jaded, right? Like there's no doubt that you become a little more enlightened to the bullshit in the world, a little more sensitive to the overstepping of individual liberties that takes place on a day-to-day basis, on kind of an ever increasing basis. And then you see something like like the year 2020, the last 18 months look at Australia right now. It's an absolute police state. It's a police state, and the media is like completely abiding this alongside the state, right? Where they're like participating and shaming and putting people on the news that like leave their house after having tested positive with COVID. They like blast their name in the face on the news, like, holy shit. So, I mean, these are monsters, right? These are monsters that they don't care for you. Like and you kind of see them for what they are. I will say one thing that Bitcoin has given me though, in the midst of the jadedness, is like all of a sudden this, at the same time I get this, jaded negativity, I get this overwhelming hope and optimism and positivity and passion that, we have a tool that's outside of their reach, right? It's not that they're not powerful enough. It's just that they just don't occupy this space, right? Because governments around the world aren't omnipresent. As much as the United States government would like to tell you that it's omnipresent, it's not. It's truly not everywhere at once, and it can't shut down a system like Bitcoin. I'm running a node here at my house. I know personally of probably like 150, 200 people running nodes, but I think there's, in the neighborhood of 30, 40, 50,000, maybe even more than that. Like, you can't shut down Bitcoin. When hash rate becomes, absolutely dives through the oil field and becomes a part of every oil and gas operation, no way you can shut down hash rate. It's going to be so geographically decided. You could shut down the grid and mining computers won't even go down. So, it's governments have become more horrifying in my mind, but I've become more optimistic that we have the tools to defend ourselves against governments and central banks, right? So like at this, it's shit, man, it's a ride, right? Like it pulls your stomach a little bit, where you realize these people that Bitcoin render obsolete, like they're not going to go quietly. They're not going to just lay down their power and give it away. They're going to scream and they're going to fight, and they're going to vilify us. And I just don't see them going quietly. I just can't see a world where the central bank, the Federal Reserve of the United States is like, oh, well, I guess we're just gonna have to buy Bitcoin now because, like there's no fucking way that they just lay down. No way. So, I don't know. I'm still a little bit, nervous to what they're capable of. Because here's the thing, like I know these people, they'll cross a line that I won't cross, right? like they're more immoral than I'm willing to be. They're sicker than I am, right? Like I'm not willing to do horrendous things to people. They are. And so thank God we don't have to. Thank God we can just opt out with Bitcoin. But still, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be painful for us. So I guess preparing for the worst while still being optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but think that, with your passion and your energy, that you're also extremely positive and kind of optimistic about things before maybe 2020, and maybe this shattered a bit of your worldview. I think we both agree on how, or I shouldn't speak. I'm not trying to speak for you. I just think that, like you mentioned, you since Bitcoin, you've been a little more jaded. I didn't think of you as jaded. That's the thing, and
yeah. No, I mean, but especially 2020, man. I mean, shit, to see how quickly people just gave up their freedoms, it was like really discouraging. Like, holy shit, it's not that hard. They just gotta like tell them they're gonna get the flu.
Yeah.
And people will just like sacrifice everything. Like I thought they'd put up a little bit more of a fight.
And I just saw you driving in your pickup truck under the cover of dark everywhere with miners in the in the back of the flatbed. And I think we also agree. I mean, I think the real fight, and more fights are coming from the government. I don't think that this is anything like Custer's last stand yet. I think it's coming hard and fast soon. I don't know if it's at 500K or a million or 100K or whatever happens. But I do want to turn to a positive note. There are tools at hand to kind of decentralize, build your own citadel, whatever that means to you right now. And I'd love to hear about the black box home mining kit that you guys are putting out.
Oh yeah, an Upstream. Yeah, the one that Steve released the other day or announced the other day. Yeah, it's kind of a home. This is something I've and I'm not alone in this, but I've been barking at Steve to design what I called like a backyard hash hut for a while now, because like the thing about home mining, like you're trying to run an ASIC at your house, is like you pretty much are going to have to call an electrician no matter what, like especially if you're going to use any of the newer gen stuff, right? It's 220 volt here in the United States, you're gonna have to call an electrician.
Am I gonna have to
And so
upgrade my whole house? How many voltage
not like
I'm
your
getting?
whole house. No, not necessarily. Like you might have to upgrade like your like essentially your main disconnect or your your main transformer box, right? But like it shouldn't be an insane cost adder. But like it's again, it's it's something you're gonna have to consult an electrician, see what you got and see what they can do. But beyond that, there's still a lot of DIY that needs to kind of take place if you want to run really even more than one miner, but even one, like, you want to have this thing in a place where it's going to be protected from weather or, any kind of dust particles getting directly in it. And then beyond that, you want to be able to control airflow so that it's not intaking its own exhaust and overheating itself and things. And so we just at Upstream Data, Steve finally, between my constant bickering at him and apparently some other Bitcoiners who've been telling him the same thing, he decided to like actually just design one, right? He's like, he was like, I know I could design. Like, I'm like, Steve, I'm sure you've already designed this. Like, you need to spend like literally an hour like getting down. I'm sure you'll whip it out in no time. And he did. It's a cool design, right? It's just it's a small box. I think it's about 34 inches cubed, right? So 34 inches, about 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide, 3 feet long. And the top opens up. It's soundproofed, and so it's got capacity for 2 Antminer S19s, or you could run. I think you could run like one S19 and maybe 2 S9s, or maybe I think 3 or 4 S9s. And so you got a couple of options in terms of like how many miners you can run, and then it'll kill a ton of the sound. Like, I mean, I think we got it down below 45 or 50, like below 50, 45 decibels, and normally they're around 75, which may not sound like a ton, but honestly, it's like the difference between shutting your door and not hearing anything and like shutting your door and it being as though there's not even like a wall in between you. So, I think I'm really excited about it. We're doing like the pre-orders here, I think in a couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for a link. I'll share it on my Twitter, and I'm sure we'll share it on our Upstream Data website, upstreamdata.ca. So keep an eye out for that if you're looking to mine at home. It'll just be something where you can, you call an electrician and then it's like, hey, I can set these things here. You could put this box outside under your deck. You could put it in a shed out in your backyard, wherever. It's all weather. Like, that way you don't have to, go to Home Depot and try to like build racks and, try to figure out this shit. It's just kind of a simple, all in one little plug and play.
Yeah. I'm kind of actually, I would say proud to say that I once with my best friend built a shitcoin mining machine, and we went through. Yeah, we went through all these, issues you're going through, and we abandoned the project because it was a shit coin. But I wish I had carried the notion forward, and I think what you guys are building looks dope, and I'm super excited about this aspect of Bitcoin and what it can do for the environment and what it can do for energy. I started my career actually as an accountant at Consolidated Edison in New York City, which is the biggest power company there. And it's just, fascinating to think about, how they power the network for, 24 hours a day, even if it's only being used at peak capacity for 1 or 2 hours of that or whatever it is. And there's just so much opportunity here. It's a really a no-brainer. I get what you're saying about, 2021, the budgets are in the books, and these guys got to look forward to maybe 2022 and 2023, and number grow up is a big part of that. But over the long term, I just can't be more optimistic about what it could do for the environment. And I just hope that, we get the best and brightest leaders with maybe some altruism behind it, so that, I don't know, just so that we get the most out of it, and it's not just rent seeking.
No, and I think there's a lot of good things that can come from it. I think, one thing I've mentioned before is I think we could end up seeing the upstream oil and gas lobby, become pro Bitcoin, right? And that's a really powerful lobby in Washington, right? And so, what happens when the oil and gas lobby becomes pro Bitcoin? Like, do we even need a Bitcoin lobby at that point? Like, the oil and gas lobby is really powerful and really wealthy. So, I think there's a lot of kind of externalities and outcomes that maybe we're not looking at specifically yet, but it'll be quite apparent when they come that Bitcoin, helped usher this in, right? This optionality in this new kind of market. help to bring about all of these systematic changes, right? From oil and gas to whatever. I also think it's going to be kind of an interesting thing to see how the crony carbon credit game is played with Bitcoin mining, right? Because I think there's going to be a significant amount of Bitcoin miners that are subsidized in the form of carbon credits, right? Whether they be doing exactly what we're helping them do at Upstream Data, which we have some customers who are receiving carbon credits for mining Bitcoin on their flare gas, on their vent gas. But beyond that, like I think, guys that are either leveraging wind or solar that are earning carbon credits, they're effectively being subsidized to mine Bitcoin. And how does that fuck with, the economics of mining Bitcoin and where's break even? I think there's some interesting conversations around that can be had. And so we're going to see this play out. We're going to get some more data. I think honestly, the next 18, 24 months are going to be really enlightening to this industry, and especially give us an idea of what the rest of the decade is going to look like in terms of how serious chip production becomes, as well as, is Bitcoin going to continue this boom bust kind of cycle thing that it always does? I mean, if it does it one more time, it's almost like, okay, well, it's locked in freaking stone for everybody, right? But if we're going to actually need to see, a $500,000, $5 million Bitcoin price, I'd say by, 2035, 2032, we need to see a multi-million dollar Bitcoin price for us to really justify the amount of energy that needs to be rescued by Bitcoin, right? For oil and gas producers to really use a significant percentage of what they're wasting, we need multi-million dollar Bitcoin.
Yeah. Multi-million dollar Bitcoin by 2020 to 2032, 2035, to justify what the investment of the ONG industry justifies. I agree. Yes. A little bearish. Also, yes, Adam. I think
always.
I do think the boom and bust cycle will dramatically decrease. And I think even, if you're at 500K, if a 10% bust is dramatic. So I think in that regards, it might still feel dramatic, but I think we'll see less volatility once we get up into those higher price bands.
So you don't think we'll see like a 500 to like a 20, like a 500,000 to like a 200,000 drop kind of thing?
I'm no prognosticator, and it's not an investment show. And long term, I really don't care. And short term, that would actually be a huge win if we continue with the boom and bust. And my thesis is correct. But no, I don't think we're going to see a 90% or 80% drop. I do tend to lean towards being a bit of a last cycle. And but we'll see how it plays out. And I think it's really about the fundamentals and the long-term thesis, though, around what's going to be in 2030 and 2035. Short term, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation, and I'm glad we finally got it together and put it in the books. So I love the energy and passion that you bring, and I'm a bit jealous of the game you get to play out there in the fields with the oil and the gas and trying.
Well, I'm jealous of the podcast game, man. You get to talk to all the awesome minds, do all the cool stuff, get asked from all the great questions, and you're great at doing the interviews. So I enjoyed being on this. It's an honor. I mean, the Matrix podcast is legendary, man. You've had some of the best guests, and so I think that everyone's kind of got their like a role to play, and we get to build out this new industry. And I'm always excited to work with ambitious, optimistic people that are as excited as I am, right? Like that's what this is. Sometimes I wake up, it's like, yeah, I've got work to do today, but like the work I get to do today is so kick ass. It's really hard for me to be down about it. Like I have a hard time not being motivated. And, even though it's like, oh crap, I've got a call at 11. The second I get on the phone, I'm ecstatic about the phone call. Like I was looking forward to talking to these people. Like it's only a begrudging chore in my mind because that's just how our brains work when it comes to like your job, but usually the second I'm on the phone, it's like, God, I love doing this. Like this is what it's all about. So, I'd recommend if people want to, if people are looking to invest in this or something, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out my DMs. I do offer consulting where you can pay, and I donate some of that to Bitcoin core development. But if you have quick questions or something, like I have so many DMs, I go through every now and then and just give people my heartfelt answers, unbiased kind of opinion. And I'd be, I'm happy to help people out, and happy to talk to anybody that's looking to help build this stuff out, because that's the coolest part of what a time to be alive, right? Like, what else is there to do during this decade? Sit there and complain about, fucking vaccines and politicians? Like, no, I'm gonna go build up like the coolest industry ever. So.
Yeah, man. Well, I believe you. I hope people reach out. Definitely let people know exactly where they can find you, what you're doing over at Coinbeast and how you can help them there. And I'm hoping and look forward to seeing you over at BitBlock Boom. This will probably come out maybe a week after, but I'm definitely psyched to see you down there.
Oh, cool. That's kind of cool timing then. Yeah, I'll see you down at BitBlock Boom. I'll be there. I'm actually leaving. I'm going down to Houston here in a couple of days, and then I'm driving over to Dallas for BitBlock Boom. So I'll be there. I'll see you. If people want to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me on Twitter, right? Denver Bitcoin is my handle there. Or you can check me out on Coinbeast. So that's coinbeast.com. And when you go to coinbeast.com, you'll see a button at the top that says connect. And then I'm on there. I'm listed there, Adam O. You can book time with me. You can just like go to my calendar and I'll get an email notification that you and I have a Zoom meeting. And I'll be happy to share, kind of my inside playbook, if you will, like all my raw numbers from mining Bitcoin myself in the oil field and what I think is, kind of a smart thing to do right now and why I think that. Happy to meet with anybody. And then definitely check out Upstream Data, upstreamdata.ca. We're doing, I think it's the coolest company in oil and gas, one of the coolest companies in Bitcoin for sure. And, we're doing a lot of cool stuff. So give it a look. And, if it's something where, you either one, have an oil and gas background or have a vast oil and gas network, it's possible there's some serious viable opportunity for you to invest in this space, right? To come in and do a joint venture with an oil and gas company and get some miners set up, right? Whether you split those upfront costs, but either way, there's a solution to this flare gas problem that's so prevalent and plenty of people are coming to invest in it. So I'd be happy to talk to anybody interested in that. Other than that, definitely check out the Bitcoin Matrix podcast all the time because Sed's the best. And so glad to be here, man. This is great.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate that. This has been so dope. Peace.
Awesome. Yeah, cheers.
Adam O, aka Denver Bitcoin, on oil and gas, Bitcoin mining, and those crazy digital wildcats that are squatting on that magic internet money via stranded energy resources right here on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. This episode is brought to you by Ledn. Ledn, LEDN.io, is a secure, simple, and easy-to-use platform for managing and growing your digital wealth. Ledn is the first digital asset lender with transparency and security of a formal proof of reserves attestation, raising the bar in the space. If you want to see what it's all about and get $50 free in USDC when you take out your first Ledn loan, head over to start.ledn.io/Bitcoin Matrix. And thank you for listening. It means a lot. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming shows. We already have lots of great guest schedules in the week ahead. Finally, I hope that you'll give the Bitcoin Matrix podcast a 5-star rating over on Apple Podcasts. Hopefully you think we deserve it. Stack sass, stay humble, and carry on. This is Cedric. Peace.